So one of the remaining features that we want to add to our Puggle game is getting the whole, hey, the camera zooms in and the whole world slows down and you get that really nice tense moment when our ball is close to hitting that very last peg on screen. Now we'll break this up into several different components, and first let's focus on the camera. Now I'll be honest, most of the stuff I'm about to show you here has nothing at all to do with Box 2D. A lot of this is just basic kind of Flash stuff. So if you're already experienced with the whole adding in a camera to a Flash game technology, feel free to skip or quickly skim through this lesson. But I feel like I've seen this asked enough on various forums and various mailing lists that I figured somebody ought to put up a lesson on how to do it. And since I guess nobody else has yet, I'll be the volunteer. So at first glance, it might seem like the whole process of panning and zooming and moving the camera around would be kind of a huge pain in the butt. I mean, it seems like we'd have to spend an awful lot of time shifting around the coordinates of everything and doing an awful lot of calculations. You know, for instance, if our application, we've got these two boxes and the XY coordinate of this first box is at 1010, and we say, hey, you know what, let's move our camera up and to the left a little bit. Suddenly, in order to simulate that, maybe we've got to take all of our boxes and move them down and to the right, and then, God forbid, we want to zoom in, we'd have to do an awful lot of calculation to figure out, okay, where's this box going to be now? I guess maybe because we're zooming in, it might be moved into the left to simulate the whole zoom in effect, and oh my God, this is just way too confusing and too much math. To hell with it, we'll have a fixed camera. And for all I know, maybe that's how painful camera work actually is on, say, a C++ game. Luckily, Flash has this whole hierarchical sprite model that actually makes cameras very easy to implement. And you do this through the introduction of another sprite in your hierarchy that I like to call the camera sprite. This is sort of an empty container sprite that basically just sits on your stage and does very little else except hold every other object that you want to be in the scene. In our former example, we would take that box 1 and box 2 and stick it in our camera sprite. And then if we decide, hey, you know what, we want to move the camera so that the world looks like it's moving down and to the right, rather than having to calculate new coordinates for all these boxes, we only have to do one thing, and that's move the camera sprite. I move the camera sprite around, and as far as box 1 and box 2 are concerned, their position hasn't changed. You know, sprites in Flash generally think of their coordinates as relative to their parent. And if you put box 1 and box 2 inside this camera sprite as their parent, you can move the camera sprite wherever you want, and box 1 and box 2 won't really think that their position has changed. And this even holds true if, say, you were to zoom in. You know, even though our box is actually moved to the left and further down on the stage than it was at the beginning, our box 1 still thinks it's at the XY position of 10, 10. Although this might seem confusing, this actually ends up being a very good thing most of the time. It means that our sprites don't have to make any adjustment to their behavior based on what the camera is doing. And for our sprites that are basically trying to position themselves based on the underlying bodies that are moving around in our box 2D world, this works out even better. They can just keep following along like they were doing, and the camera will take care of all of the panning and zooming work. So I don't know if that explanation made a whole lot of sense without seeing something in practice, but let's try and put a camera sprite into our game, and maybe that'll give you a better idea of what's going on. So first things first, we're going to go back to our code, and I'm going to create a new class that's called camera. And this is going to extend sprite. And I'm going to do one thing and one thing only with this sprite for now, just to kind of demonstrate what's going on. And that's to make it slowly move up every frame. So I'm going to add an event listener. And you don't have to copy this code if you don't want to. I'm going to delete it in a second. But I'm going to say on enter frame, move up. And this move up function is just going to decrement the y value of the sprite by 1. Now let's go back to our Puggle application and look at where we created all of these things in our world in our create level function. You'll notice that every actor we created we have specified the parent container of this actor. And up until now, the parent container has been this main Puggle application. And now what I can do is create a camera, place it on the stage, and make this camera the parent of every actor we're creating in our level. So to do that, first things first, I'm just going to add a little member variable called camera, which is going to be a camera. And then before I add any other actors to the world, I'm going to say camera equals new camera, and I will add it as a child. And then I'm going to jump to our create level function, and pretty much every place I create an actor where I specify this as the parent, I'm now going to specify the camera as the parent. And now I'm going to do this in every place that I have created an actor. So you can probably do this using a search and replace. I'm going to do it manually just so you can see all the places we're doing it. Got to get the left and right walls. You got to get the ramps. You got to get the bonus chute. And also remember that when we create a new ball into our world, we're going to have our camera as our ball actor. So let's run this and see what we get. Hey, look at that. Our world is gradually moving up, but it is still behaving completely normally. You'll notice that everything is still behaving the way it should be, because as far as the underlying Box 2D world goes, none of this stuff is really moving any differently. It's just that the parent sprite that contains all of our Puggle graphics is itself gradually moving up, and that gives us the impression that our camera is panning down in our world. Obviously, not very useful if you plan on playing more than a few seconds, but hopefully at this point you kind of get what's going on, and now we can focus on creating that zoom effect. So we'll do that next.